So now that this thing has been running for 2 or 3 weeks or something like that, seemed like a good time to make a follow-up video and talk a little bit about how it's worked out, how reliable it's been, how much confidence I have in it at this point, things like that. And so despite getting the CPU getting to nearly 200 degrees in the second half of the day when the sun is directly on and it's no longer shaded by the magnolia tree it sits under, I haven't seen any thermal throttling or anything like that. And like I said in the first video, the only heat dissipation I have is a very small heat sink that's just as big as the CPU, and it has no active cooling, and the case itself has no ventilation. So I kind of already talked about that at length. I don't know if I'm going to install cooling. It's actively at some point, but it seems to have caused no problems at this point. That might be a different story in the dead of summer when ambient is 100 and maybe the CPU gets to 250, and then I start to have problems, but I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But a big problem of testing any of this, much less reliability with respect to the weather and temperature, is getting positive validation, right? I don't know for certain whether or not it's picking up every motion that comes in front of it. Like the best that I can do without making some kind of robust, persistent logging within motion, such that it logs all the motion, and then I can try and correspond it to a video clip that makes it to the server. All I can really go off is my average clips recorded per day, which is about 250. Between 220 and 280 is pretty good. So that's basically when I pull them up for the day and I pull them to my local computer and there's about 250, well, I'm gonna probably ran all day. And I can look a little bit further and say, yeah, these are pretty evenly distributed across the day. It's obviously weighted to mornings and afternoon, or mornings and early evening when people are leaving to go to work and coming back from work, and it slows down during the middle of the day a little bit and all this other stuff. But that's all I really have to go on. Seems like enough, but we'll kind of get into the other complications with that in a minute. But the main software error, which perhaps I should put error in air quotes, is a system log, because this runs as a systems CTL service, is a log that says corrupted JPEG in the data stream, and therefore there's nothing to write to the cache and the server, etc. The Motion docs don't have any FAQ about common errors or problems. I don't know if that's a false negative, or if it's caused by the webcam being overpowered and perhaps drawing too much power and being laggy because of it, or just some kind of internal issue with its auto-focusing and auto-exposure, which aren't really things that I want to disable, because that's what gives it a little bit better low-light performance. Despite that, none of running top or HTOP doesn't show that anything is ever getting pegged out, whether that's the CPU, RAM usage, or anything like that. There's nothing that seems to indicate there's problems or bottleneck anywhere, because on top of that, the shell script that's doing stuff after the motion is captured, one, caches it locally rather than trying to stream it as it's recorded, and two, restricts the data flow speed to I think 500 or 250 kilobits a second. So I slow it way down, even though my Wi-Fi could probably handle much faster than that. I'd rather it take another second or two rather than it being corrupted when it gets there, or causing some kind of network congestion, because this is the same network everything else in my house is on: devices, computers, the TV, etc. So in the process of trying to stabilize this error, which happens during the day, maybe once every 3 to 5 minutes, and a little bit more frequently at night, so maybe noise plays some kind of role in this, I don't know, is fiddling with frame rates and recording sizes. I ended up at 960 by 720 in 10 frames a second, which seems like the bare minimum in my opinion for a security camera that's worth more than its weight in dirt. But it's really, I would have loved to have 1080p or at least 960 by 720 at between 15 and 30 frames a second, but that's okay. It's acceptable, I guess. Again, like I said in the first video, I've changed so many things that I'm not sure what has made problems better or worse because documentation is so scant. So I'm kind of hesitant to share my configs with you guys because I don't want to steer people in the wrong direction. I could be doing something totally wrong. I don't know, but like it's rather hard to find information about this particular piece of software. And so I guess at this point, if you watched the first video and you were like, okay, maybe, and now you're watching this one, I would say that if you're still intent on, for whatever reason, building your own security camera from scratch rather than buying one from Amazon or big box store that's plug and play, I would say one, do as much, gather all the research you can find about different video capture software, whether that's motion or something that's a little lower level and maybe is going to require you to do some deeper fiddling, maybe some actual coding rather than just a config file, and as well as pairing that software with a particular Raspberry Pi or whatever micro single board computer you decide to use. Allegedly, there are some softwares that work better or worse with different Pi versions. I don't know how true that is. I went with this setup, webcam, software, and Pi because that's what Claude or ChatGPT recommended to me. So I'm kicking myself in the pants a little bit over that for not doing my own research, but that's okay. And then also I would look into webcams as well. It seems that mine maybe not getting enough power from the Pi. I couldn't find anywhere on Logitech's website. I'm using a C920 for power draw, and I can't remember what kind of stable power draw you can expect from a Raspberry Pi. I think it's between 2 and 5 volts. I can't remember wattage or anything like that. And every time I did digging running like LSUSB on the Pi and whatnot, it always, the Pi always acts like the camera is going through a USB hub for some reason, even though it's definitely not. And like, I almost started arguing with ChatGPT, as asinine as that sounds, and I would like copy paste the outputs of whatever command Chat suggested I run. It would be like, well, there's your problem, you're running it through a USB hub. And it's like, no, I'm gonna strangle you by the neck. There's no USB hub. There isn't even room for one if I wanted one, and there's no need to have one. I don't have one. It definitely doesn't exist. So that, I think that might actually be a hardware bug within Raspberry Pi. So maybe I just got a bad one, or I've broken something very minor. I'm not certain, but my Raspberry Pi is convinced that the webcam is going through a USB hub. Unless, of course, there is some kind of piece of software within the camera itself that looks like a USB hub to the Pi, which, you know, it makes this layer of complication, and it's hard to pin down whether or not it's actually problematic, which is why I would say, again, do as much research as possible about what kind of camera you want to use and whether you're willing to go for something simpler that doesn't draw nearly as much power, but also you're going to have other trade-offs like autofocus and auto exposure and resolution and all this other stuff. I think ones are made specifically for Raspberry Pis that don't come with the housing. They're just like a ribbon connector. I think they're about the same price. I can't remember what their quality is like, but your results may vary, your mileage may vary. So given how frequently this error keeps cropping up, it does handle it gracefully, so it doesn't turn off the system service. It doesn't kill motion. It just sort of does a soft restart, I guess you'd call it. And it still captures, 250 motion detections a day, which seems about right. I mean, there's 100 people, there's about 100 houses in this neighborhood, and there's no through access anywhere else. So between people who live here, granted not all of them drive, and delivery workers, the mail drivers, service workers, utility people, whoever else, 250 occurrences a day seems accurate. Seems accurate to me. So I'm willing to take it on faith that it's capturing most of it. But I understand that at this point, I mean, you saw the picture of the camera, that I've like largely painted myself into a corner with the corners I've decided to cut with respect to lack of ventilation, placement, how jerry-rigged my mount is, lack of active cooling, all of this stuff, having to jam all this into a tiny case just so it can be kind of inconspicuous, because I could paint it white or something to deflect a lot of heat, but then it's going to stick out like a sore thumb at my green, next to my green yard. And I prefer it to be as inconspicuous as possible. I don't need a giant sign that says, hey, you're on video. People don't like that. So V2, I guess, if I decided to make it, would need a lot more planning and thought and care taken into like physical configuration, as well as where I would put it. But then also, of course, there's always the limiting factor of, well, am I going to use PoE or am I going to use Wi-Fi? PoE is going to be an absolute nightmare to run through my attic. That sounds like maybe the worst thing ever. I'd almost rather pay someone to do it, but I just don't want to. And then there's kind of the sort of issue of low light performance, which is good for a webcam, but I mean, I have a street light on my corner, the opposite corner. I can walk this entire neighborhood without a flashlight very, very easily, which I like. Because you can always draw your shades if it's too bright for you to sleep or whatever. But the low light for the camera is just not great. Even if I can see, or anyone can see outside relatively easily at night, the camera really struggles. And despite the fact that I leave a floodlight on the far side of my garage, because the camera's mounted on the side of the garage closer to the road, because my garage door is perpendicular to the road. I leave that floodlight on all night, and then I leave my inside garage lights on all night, and I don't have blinds in my garage windows, of which there are 2. It gets like none of that residual light at all, which is kind of annoying. And we're now going into winter months where days are going to get shorter, nights are going to get longer. There's going to be more darkness, more relative darkness and absolute darkness, which I don't love. It's like half the day lost, for the camera. So, and I don't want to put a floodlight on there, because then I'm probably going to be waking up neighbors. They're not going to appreciate it. I'm going to get a letter or a stern knock on the door about my 5 million lumen floodlight just so my camera can see, which makes me want to do something like IR. And again, if you want to, it's like a whole other layer. If I wanted to make a dual camera setup, or a single camera that does both IR and regular, color or whatever, that camera is probably going to be twice as expensive, 3 times as expensive as what I paid for the 920, which I believe was $65. And it's going to be more complicated. And then I'm going to need an IR floodlight and all this other stuff. So building it myself is, if I do any other iterations of it, is rapidly becoming as expensive as, or more expensive than, buying a plug and play with a single camera that does night vision as well. And then all this was made more interesting. I planned on recording this video today anyhow, and I wrote this script yesterday afternoon, and then last night, trying to fall asleep, having problems because I'm congested and the baby's congested, so he's waking up and coughing, waking me up. I'm a pretty light sleeper compared to my wife. And I hear some talking outside the window, and frequently I can hear the neighbors talking while I'm inside, but I can generally tell what direction it's coming from and what their voices sound like. I hear it enough. And I'm laying in bed and I hear people talking, and their voices are unfamiliar, and they're also unusually loud. I'm like, that's odd. And then I hear what sounds to me like someone running in flip-flops or sandals. And I'm like, that's even odder. Why is someone running down the street this was at 11:50, basically midnight last night. And so I get up and I crack the blinds, And by the time I get there and I'm looking out the window, however many people there were outside of the car, I don't know, or now I'm back in the car. I can't really see inside the car to see like, are these teenagers, are these adults, how many people there are. They're back in the car, and then they sit there. This is in front of my house on the far side of the road, but the roads in my neighborhood are relatively narrow, like maybe 15 feet wide. So like you have to be slow when you pass someone because it's kind of close. So they're on the far side of the road, but across from my house, and I can hear them and yada yada. And I'm watching them, and they sit there for, I don't know, 30 to 45 seconds. And then they very abruptly put it into gear or whatever, and they come around my corner, because I'm a corner lot. They come around to the side here, and then they back up, and then they haul ass out of the neighborhood. And I'm like, that's weird. I don't know why anyone would be doing this. I don't even know that you can order Uber Eats or DoorDash at midnight. I don't know who's open to make you any food, or if they were just lost or what, but it seemed like odd behavior. But I was able to pull up the clip from 11:49 where it shows them pulling up, and the quality of the camera is such that all I can really see is headlight and taillight and very, very vague intimations of what the outline of the car is. I mean, I got more information about what kind of car it was just based on looking at it physically myself rather than the camera. But I have the clip where they're coming down the street and they slow, and then they come to a stop in front of my house. And then after a few moments of non-motion, the software in the camera is like, okay, no more motion, it stops recording. And for whatever reason, it didn't pick up when they started moving again and when they turned around and peeled back out of the driveway. And I'm wondering if that's maybe because they were driving so fast. I'm only getting 10 frames a second. It might have been a single frame. I don't know. I think I have a setting that specifies how many frames of motion there must be before it starts recording, just to roll out like noise and stuff like that, which, everything's always a give and take with these things, even in the config files. But I laid there in bed and was like, that's weird. I hope that wasn't, someone, malicious. I mean, they're in front of my house. Are they trying to steal my car? Are they just lost? I don't know. I don't want to assume the worst in people, but, never know. You never know. And, home security is, kind of like insurance that I like to diversify, if you catch my drift. So it made me want some kind of IR solution where I can truly see at night at least the outline of like cars and bodies and people, so that I can, identify a vehicle or whatever. So that's been my adventure. I think I'm going to check the camera every day, check its system service logs to see how many times it's crashing, look at the averages for how many videos it's recording, and maybe after another week or two I'm satisfied that it's stable and we're going into fall and it's cooling off, so I don't have to worry about thermal problems and all that stuff. I'll probably just set it and forget it and maybe check it once a week, just enough to clear off the server if it's starting to get full, and call it a day. So I don't know that I'll be making a follow-up to this video unless, for whatever reason, the camera fails in some spectacular fashion, like catching on fire. So hopefully the first video and this one were informative and maybe helped you try and decide whether or not building your own camera is worth it. Maybe it is, whatever reasons you might have. I talked about that a little bit more in the first video. It's certainly fun, nice learning experience. So whether it's going to be reliable, it's kind of, exponential how much effort you have to put in order for it to get incrementally as good as a store-bought plug-and-play version. So anyways, I'll leave it there. The cat is meowing for some reason. Hopefully this was helpful to you, but thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.